Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for our Shakesology event today for the Taming of the Shrew, Tennessee Stage Company's 2023 first play of the season for Knoxville Shakespeare at Ijams this summer. If you don't mind holding for us for just a few more minutes, we're going to let our other participants trickle in, especially those that are hanging out with us in the Zoom. If you would like to join us in the Zoom, then you absolutely can. Just go to tennesseestage.com/Zoom, and it will take you directly to the registration page where you can register and join us inside the chat. The reason why that's fun is because it then allows you to talk to us without any delay whatsoever. Facebook does have a little bit of a delay on it. So if you would like to do that, we'd love to have you. Otherwise, please feel free to chill out here. And we are also attempting to stream on YouTube today. So if you hop on over there, you're welcome to send me a message on how it's going at the Tennessee Stage Facebook event. But I am excited to see you guys, and I know that Dr. Horn is excited as well. So we'll see you in just about 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. I hope everything is going great with you guys, and thank you so much for joining us. Here, I've got me and Dr. Horn, our dramaturg. I suppose I should change my name so it doesn't say Tennessee Stage, for I am not the entire stage. I am but a small part. A man in his time plays many parts, right? All right. Okay, great. Now let's go ahead and get our participants started over here in the live stream. So any of our audience members who are joining us via our stream or via our Zoom webinar can absolutely join in that way. We'd love to have you and see you there. Otherwise, we've got our stream going here on Facebook and over there on YouTube. So if I disappear for a second, it's because I have to go check on our YouTube stream, which is currently happening in another room. I tried yesterday to test streaming all of them everywhere, and my spouse had to fix my computer. So thus as it goes.
And I was going to say, if people are bored, they can see how many Shakespeare or Taming of the Shrew related things they can count in my background.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Including Catherine quote on the shirt. Oh, yes.
Yes, our Catherine that's playing Catherine this time around is Caroline King, who has been with us for many years, and in fact has played in the complete works of William Shakespeare a time or two ago when we did the show, and she's playing Kate this summer. And watching her say that line is my favorite thing in the whole wide world. It's so funny. Yeah. All right. Well, we've got our quiz questions all ready and all started. And we've got our cameras all up and running. So I'm ready to go when you are, Dr. Horn.
Absolutely. So I'm Jen Horn. I am a professor at Pellissippi State Community College at our Blount County campus. And I'm a Shakespearean. I actually got my PhD writing about adaptations of Taming of the Shrew. So we are absolutely in my happy place. And as a result, I have lots of silly things that are about the Taming of the Shrew that I'll be holding up at various points that I have accumulated. One of my favorites is a Catherine chocolate bar. I couldn't bear to eat it, but yeah, I really should have bought a second one, but it has some lovely descriptions about why they chose the flavors for different leading ladies from the Royal Shakespeare Company. Today we get to do a deep dive into the Taming of the Shrew. So I'm going to start sharing my screen for the PowerPoint. And if we have any questions at the end, I am happy to take questions. We also have about 8 questions for you all that you can that you'll get a chance to answer. And I will say most of the questions today, if you are not already familiar with Shakesology, they are devilishly difficult. We expect you to come in maybe knowing nothing, maybe being an expert, anywhere in between, but by the end, hopefully you will know a lot about this play and its history. So with any of the questions, if you don't know the answers, by all means, make it up. Make a guess. You will not get points taken off if you're not perfect. So we're here to talk about one of my favorite plays, and it is a bit of a controversial play for reasons that we're going to go into. The Taming of the Shrew. I absolutely love this action shot, even if it's blurry, it gets the spirit of the play. And yeah, one of my favorite moments that actually happens off stage in the text with her breaking the lute, an old-fashioned version of the guitar, over her music teacher's head. So wanted to bring that in. But of course, we're here to talk about the Taming of the Shrew, which leads us to the obvious question of what on earth is a shrew? No, this is not one of the official questions yet. Often the first answer people give me when I talk about this play is it looks like a mouse with a long nose. So obviously this is a literal shrew. This is where all of the terminology comes from. And maybe taming it might be interesting to watch. Maybe a little hamster wheel, I don't know. But for this one, we're looking at a slightly different reason or a different definition for it. So with this, I headed to the Oxford English Dictionary, which is excellent at giving a list of quotes with a word. And so what I wanted to show with this is this definition: a person, especially and now only a woman, giving to railing or scolding or other perverse or malignant behavior, frequently a scolding or turbulent wife. This was a tradition in British culture. You had horrible shrews trying to act out, and you can see references here as far back as Geoffrey Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales. Lobbying shrew is she, all the way up to Elizabethan times when Shakespeare was writing. And you even get some things at the exact time of Shakespeare with this, his wife who was a wicked shrew. That one's a little bit later, all the way up to Rip Van Winkle, and some alternate spellings, because of course in Shakespeare's day we don't know how to spell. There's no universal spelling until much later with Samuel Johnson's dictionary. But you get a woman who is behaving shrewishly. And one of the interesting things about the shrew in Shakespeare's time, you get this tiny sentence here, and I will show you what that links to. There was this connection between shrew and sheep. I think it's just because it's fun to say the two together, but having those be opposite types of wives. And that really comes out in Elizabethan England for this. You see examples in 1573 up to 1580. and one shrew is worth two sheep. Give me the sheep, take thou the shrew. Yet she may seem somewhat shrewish at first, yet in time she may become a sheep. And all of this idea of them put together, and later on you're going to hear a comparison of the two. But I want to add to all of this one other definition that actually comes earlier in the Oxford English Dictionary's entry for it, which is saying this can absolutely be a man, a wicked, evil disposed or malignant man, a mischievous or vexatious person, a rascal, or a villain. And that is from as early as 1250. And you get this usage in at least one of Shakespeare's sources, Gower's Confessio Amantis. So, and his chronicles, where Shakespeare gets a lot of his history of the kings and queens of England. So this is the possibility that when we're talking about a shrew, it doesn't have to be the main female character. It might be the main male character as well. So do keep that in mind as we're looking at everything. So with this idea, in the Elizabethan and Jacobean age, there are these three terms that get used almost interchangeably: shrews and scolds, definitely, but also something slightly unexpected with witches. Not only are these terms used interchangeably, but possibly worse, the punishments were absolutely interchangeable. So if a woman is outspoken and vexatious, she might be treated like a witch or assumed to be a witch. So keep that in mind. This is not something to take lightly, even when, or maybe especially when you have Queen Elizabeth as a strong leader of the kingdom, saying she doesn't need a husband. She is the mother of her country. She is married to her country. And so maybe this is to discourage other women from trying to take similar leadership roles. So the punishments for shrews, scolds, and witches can include carting, which doesn't sound too bad. You cart the woman through town, or if her husband has let her behave like this, you cart both of them. Make him an example too. We don't need any allies in bad behavior. So put them on a cart and display them to the whole town. Now, sometimes it gets escalated and you get all of the company, all of the community coming in with this and a type of charivari, which was a French activity more so than English, but it gets transported over a bit. And so you have everybody banging on pots and pans to humiliate the woman and or her husband. One of the traditions with this is making sure the woman rides backwards on a horse to symbolize how she is acting backwards in her life. But really just trying to have the worst public humiliation available. So maybe carts, maybe horses, get the whole community out here. And here is a punishment that we associate now more with witchcraft, but it absolutely was used for shrews and scolds as well. And that is having a stool that you were ducked into a river with. And of course, if you float, I never get this right. Now I need to go back and rewatch my Python and the Holy Grail. I think it's if you drown, you were innocent. If you float, you're a witch, something like that. But that would definitely think waterboarding as a real punishment. Another one that could be combined with the carting or the charivari is what was known as a scold's bridle. And I need to be clear, this was technically illegal in England and Scotland at the time, although it was used by magistrates in the Elizabethan period. Even though it was supposed to be illegal, it was more common on the continent in places like Belgium, but this was used, and there is a wide range of these bridles that still exist. and they would be a metal helmet of some sort with room for your nose, but they would have this little metal piece, and here is a detail of that. So a little bit enlarged, a metal piece that would go in the scold's mouth and hold down her tongue. Now, if you see the detail of this particular one with spikes to literally hold down her tongue, this is pretty horrifying. Not all of them have spikes. Some of them are just a piece of metal, but here is where it gets bad, because the woman would be paraded around town, whether it is walking. This, by the way, was in one of the books about the possible treatment of it from the time period. So either walking or possibly on a cart or possibly on a horse. And if you can think about how much the person would be jostled in a cart or jostled on a horse, anyone worried about the teeth getting broken? Is that just me? It actually would be a possible long-term consequence of this, that you would end up with broken teeth and wear that to your shame at a time when dentistry was not good. So these are serious punishments for women who speak out, women who are going against the norm, whether they're witches or anything else. So keep this in the back of your mind as we're talking about this. So then the basic plot of Shakespeare's play. And actually, before I click anything else, Caitlin, I need your help, because we have that first question. And we'll put this on here. So what is odd about the first scene of The Taming of the Shrew? We're going to have some that are multiple choice, but some that are right in. So if you have no clue, put that in. Feel free. If you guess, do that. But what is odd or interesting about the first scene of The Taming of the Shrew? So if you have any ideas, put it in the chat wherever you're watching this, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, whether it is Zoom. So any possibilities?
Okay, so I have this was actually the first show that we did where I was on stage, I think. And someone's going to come back and be like, no, know this better than me, and that's going to crack me up. And I, honest to God, have no idea what the answer is. Okay, so in the opening scene, oh God, well, okay, so it takes place outside. Or I guess our productions take place outside. Oh my God, I don't know the answer. Let's see if anyone on the internet is smarter than me, which, is totally legitimate.
And here's the thing, as you're looking, it sounds like it would be an easy answer. It's really not. I know lots of people who've seen many productions of this play who couldn't answer this.
Does it have to do with Catherine's name?
No, but that's a good guess. We're definitely going to talk about Catherine's name.
Let's see if anyone has added anything in the chat. I will say that for the first time in the history of the shows that we've done so far, that we've done of the Shakesology that we've done so far online, this was the first time that I have gotten a spam bot.
Wow.
And he came in right at the beginning, and I was like, well, at least now I know the chat works. Very good.
Yeah, I got a little bit distracted by that myself.
Man, look at that. But we're doing great.
Okay.
All right. What is it? What is it, Jennifer?
I don't want to give people so long that they can Google this. So it is actually the fact that it is hardly ever performed. So you may see many performances of The Taming of the Shrew and never have seen the first scene of this play. So I think that's important to know. So with this, this is kind of a sketch of the plot, And the top here is what happens in the first scene, and it's called the induction scene. And it's setting up the rest of the story to be a play within a play. And you get a drunken man kicked out of an ale house, a beggar named Christopher Sly, who is then found by a lord and his servants coming back from hunting, as you do. And they say, "Oh, I'm bored. Let's dress him up as if he's the lord of the manor, put him in the bed and say, oh, you've woken up, you remember who you are, you're a beggar." And also dress up a male servant to pretend to be his wife. And what should they do for the first day that he's been saying in ages? Watch a play called The Taming of the Shrew. I can't imagine why this would ever get cut out.
Okay. I have a real legitimate question. Is that in the first folio?
Yes. Yep.
I have never.
Yeah. So, like I said,
I was literally over here. If you saw me, if you saw me looking, I'm like, I've got all the plays that we do each year, plays we think about doing, and the plays we've just done. I have all of their scripts up here and on my desk, so that I can remember where I'm going and where I've come from. And of course, all of my copies of Shrew are currently out in other people's hands. And so I was looking for my copy to be like, you lie.
Oh no.
Okay,
Oh, no.
so does this happen in any other Shakespeare show?
No. Only one.
Well, that's
this
awesome.
Is the only Shakespeare show that is a play within a play. And the crazy thing is, we get it at the very beginning. We come back after the first big scene or two in the play within a play, and then we never see them again. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on, but just know it disappears completely. So it is very easy to cut it out, but having it in reminds you that this whole show is put on to please a drunk working man who is being tricked into thinking he's a lord. So make of that what you will. It complicates all of the weirdness going on in the play even more. So for the rest of the play, what the basics are with these characters. And as you see, it's not at all complicated with all of those arrows in the chart and how everybody's related to everybody else. Not at all. So I'm not going over all of it. If you go see the play and you've never seen it before, so much will be still a surprise to you. But the basic plot is that you have a father, Baptista, and his two daughters, both of whom are young, gorgeous, smart, and rich. And so you get four of the men in town madly in love with her, including two who just arrived that day, Lucentio and his servant Tranio, who sometimes is in love and sometimes is just helping out Lucentio. And then another old man, and actually who's different from this old man, whose name is Gremio, who all are in love with Bianca and think that she is perfect and they want to marry her. But the problem is, this is Elizabethan times. The oldest sister has to get married first, and the oldest sister is a total shrew. So Bianca, who is perfect, needs to have her big sister out of the way before she can get married. So they all get together and come up with a plot to pay someone to marry Katharina. By the way, speaking of her name, you will see her name as Catherine, Katharina, and Kate. Not at all confusing, because in most of the older editions, her name is listed as Catherine in the list of characters, and it's abbreviated to Kate in the speech headings. But she actually says in the play, when she's introduced to this last guy, Petruchio, she says, "They call me Katharina that do talk of me." So her actual name that she calls herself is Katharina, not Katerina or Catherine, Katharina. So you get this. I will say I knew her first as Kate and then Catherine. So there's no telling which name is going to come out of my mouth at any given time. The same goes with all of these Italian names for the play with it. So the induction is all English characters and English locations. The play within a play is all Italian. But in Elizabethan England, they would have totally mispronounced anything Italian because, of course, they think British are better. So the old-fashioned way of saying Petruchio, which is the Italian way, would be Petruccio. And same with Lucentio Lucentio instead of Lucentio. So there are multiple pronunciations for at least those two characters. So again, it's random whether I say Petruchio or Petruchio. I apologize if anybody is offended. Just know Shakespeare times, they were all about who cares how to pronounce it. This is how we pronounce it. Which maybe times haven't changed that much. I don't know. So with this, these guys all get together and they decide to pay off the one guy who has never met Katharina to know how much of a shrew she is, who just also, so today's the day for being a new person in the city. Lucentio and Tranio just got there. And now Petruchio is there as well. So he says, I come to wive it wealthily in Padua. If wealthily, then happily in Padua. So he doesn't care what she's like. As long as she's rich, he's going to get it done. And so he's going to marry her, get her out of the way, and then all of the other guys get to vie for Bianca. But of course, marrying a shrew and taming a shrew is not the same thing. So wacky hijinks ensue. And again, not going to go into all of the details of this, but it is interesting to know, compared to other stories about shrews that were around in the time, and we'll talk more about those later, all of those started after she was married. In all of the other stories, she doesn't come out and open up about being a shrew until it's too late for the guy. So this is the one time that he knowingly is marrying a shrew. So with this, I want to talk a little bit more about now how Petruchio is going to tame Catherine. So with this, the first one is telling everybody to ignore what she says and basically do whatever you want. He comes out and says, oh, she has promised that she is going to act terribly anytime other people are around, but as soon as it's just the two of us, she throws her arms around me and kisses me, and she loves me so much. And Catherine is over there ready to strangle him. But people, I guess, want her out of their hair so much that they go along with it. Another one is that he dresses in ridiculous clothes. He shows up in silly, silly clothes for the wedding. We've got two interpretations here. This is an all Hindu language production, but I love that. I think this one gets full dedication for the silliness of the outfit. And so marrying her in ridiculous clothes. Then he doesn't let her eat after the wedding. He is trying to starve her. And not only that, he and his servants tempt her with the idea of food that she's not going to get to eat. This version really had fun with the difference in height, where there was no way this Katharina was going to ever reach that food. And similarly with let her think she's going to get nice clothes that he then in some productions rips apart. But he at least says, oh, this is terrible, even though it's usually really nice outfit. And finally, fun with gaslighting. He actually makes her claim that the sun is the moon before he is willing to go back to her father's house. And so you get some productions where she's wholeheartedly saying, yes, this is definitely the moon. And others where it is, she doesn't believe it for a second, but she just can't take it anymore. So, okay, I'll say whatever he wants me to say, and it will be fine. So with all of these are all things that we would classify today as either screwball comedy, slapstick comedy, or psychological torture, depending on how you're going to look at it. And so, yeah, just those easy things. So this is why you get such a wide range of productions with this. So again, these are his taming methods, but we know shrews and scolds and witches had all of these torments. So in a way, I'm kind of impressed that we don't have physical violence. We have psychological, absolutely. He's gaslighting her. He's doing all sorts of things that wouldn't go with the Geneva Convention, but you can also play them as wacky humor. So one of the things, and I'm going to go on to this and I'll come back to the other one. This leads you to have a couple of different lines of continuum in productions of the play, because with the exact same script, you can create a total wacky comedy that is hilarious, or something that is an absolute tragedy and travesty about how she would be treated so badly. And the same thing goes with their relationship. You can play it as, well, it's opposites attract. Maybe they have love at first sight and they're just, it's like a Beatrice and Benedict from Much Ado About Nothing, lovers or enemies to lovers. So you could absolutely play it with hatred as well, or where he breaks her down into a shell of herself. There are all of these things you can do with the exact words of Shakespeare. And to me, that makes this play fascinating. So all of that is on his side, but Catherine gets this interesting response. And this is actually the last page of the folio text. And you'll see nothing with Christopher Sly. He doesn't come back. But Catherine is made to come when her husband calls, and then that isn't enough. She also is ordered by her husband to tell the women how they should act toward their husbands, their lords and masters. And she doesn't just speak up, she talks and talks and talks. So if you're looking at this, it starts here and she says all of these things, and then all of this, it goes all the way to here. That is 44 lines of iambic pentameter, with words such as, I am ashamed that women are so simple to offer war where they should kneel for peace, or seek for rule, supremacy, and sway where they are bound to serve, love, and obey. And tells the other women, place your hands below your husband's foot in token of which duty, if he please, my hand is ready, may it do him ease. And here you get Elizabeth Taylor literally putting her hand out. Now, this is a speech that absolutely goes along with ideas about how a marriage should be in Elizabethan England. This is absolutely what the husband would want to hear. This is what Baptista wants to hear. You even get Lucicio saying, it's a wonder by your leave she will be tamed. So, wow, it's amazing. So, on the other hand, I'm getting another Shakespearean phrase in my mind, and I'm going to badly misquote it, but I think it's going to be okay. From Hamlet, the lady doth protest too much.
That's perfectly correct. Methinks the lady doth protest too much.
Yeah. She keeps on going and going and going. And I have seen this done so perfectly, where she is pretending better than anybody has ever pretended before. She has learned all of these things and she is sharing what she's learned with the class. Yeah. And by going on for so long with so many details, you're like, okay, this is ridiculous. And by the end, it's just like, okay, let's not do this. She is nowhere near as cool as she used to be. Caitlin?
Well, so I think that, there's a lot of different ways to interpret this section, but I think one of my favorite things about this monologue is the thought that I say favorite loosely, um, is that as an actor, as a performer who's, female presenting, and, Kate being one of the roles that you really want to play, you end up in this situation where it's like, well, at least I get to do that one monologue where everybody else has to shut up and listen to me. And then it turns out being that monologue where everyone has to shut up and listen to me, but also I have to do something with this that doesn't make my skin crawl in the 21st century, me as a person, right?
Yes.
And then also you have directors who are like, oh yeah, well, we cut it down. And you're like, do I want it all back or do I not want it all back? You can't decide as an actor, as a performer. You're like a female performer. You're like, I don't know if I want all of my lines back, or because if reading through this screenshot of the show, or if you go to read through it on any other printing out of it, to me, and if you don't agree in the comments, I encourage you to tell me. But there's not a line in here that I distinctly remember. Now, when you said, like, I'm gonna butcher methinks the lady doth protest too much, methinks, and I was like, no, that's it. There's so many lines that word for word, or I know for word, and I cannot tell you. And I played the other wife in the last time we did this production several years ago, and so I watched Jennifer Brown, our Catherine, one of my best friends, do this monologue to my face 20 times or something like that, and I don't remember a line of it at all. So it's a very impactful monologue, but is clearly also a monologue that has a lot of tension today, and I think there's a lot of people, feminist performers and female performers who don't think that this show is, that this show is good for us anymore. So, it's always it's always interesting to, like, have that open conversation, because so many people love it, that, and they love this monologue at the end with the chance that you might get to play, that she knows exactly what she's doing, and she knows exactly what she's saying, and she knows that she's, fooled everybody else, and that her and Petruchio are in it together, which is my preferred method of interpretation. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say,
I had to redeem myself for sounding stupid about not knowing the first scene of this play.
No, so many people don't know the answer to that. But I was going to say, one of the most famous movie versions, that was the only movie version for a long time, included a huge wink to Bianca and to the camera at the end of the speech, where Petruchio thinks that she means all of this, but Bianca knows, no, not at all. And so that was the infamous wink with it. And lots of productions followed that for a long time. But absolutely what you were saying, it's worth mentioning that lots of actors and directors and creatives have said, we need to never do this play again, that hate it. And I, on the other hand, we're going to talk about some things that I think is interesting about the play, but I love that it brings up this conversation, and that you have to figure out something to do with it. And I mean, at times, maybe it's not problematic enough in some cases, but it's always fascinating to see what the actor and the production do with this final speech. So keep that in mind. And we're also going to talk a little bit later about some of the adaptations and what they chose to do with it. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to skip over that and get to general information. But first, it is time for our second question. And this one is a multiple choice. And it is, when was The Taming of the Shrew first published? I don't need a year, but is it the beginning of Shakespeare's career, in the middle of Shakespeare's career, toward the end of Shakespeare's career, or after Shakespeare's death? So not when it was first written, but when was it first published? And there is only one correct answer here, but there is also one partial credit answer that I would take. Not for full credit, but partial credit. So again, when was it first published? At the beginning of Shakespeare's career, the middle, toward the end, or after Shakespeare's death?
All right. Well, I've put in my guess on Facebook, so if anyone's got any guesses, please feel free to throw in an answer. We have two on Facebook. We've got two answers for in the middle of Shakespeare's career, and one answer for after his death.
Okay.
And I will say that I honestly don't know the answer to this, but but the other thing I will say is that, we've got a bit in Complete Works where they say that, Shakespeare distilled five Roman comedies down into 22 or into 16 plays,
Yeah.
and I feel like this one is, I know that it's based off of another story, but I do feel like this one is very, like that's an answer I would know. You know what I mean? I feel like it's something I should know when it was written or when it was when it was written, or when it was first published. And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure that we will find out.
Okay.
So currently our lead answer is in the middle of his career. I think we're all playing it safe.
Okay. Well,
I guessed the middle of his career.
Okay. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll on this. So the first time it is published is not until the first folio, which was published actually after Shakespeare's death. So,
all right. So
and
Facebook
this
got
is
it
also
right.
where I get to plug our other Shakesology session. It's happening 2 weeks from today, which is looking at the history of the first folio. Again, 1623, 400 years ago this year. So yes, all of the Shakespeareans are rejoicing. And one of the amazing things about the first folio is this is where we get 18 of his approximately 36, 38 plays. 18 of them, including the Taming of the Shrew, were first printed in this folio. We would not have them without that book. So it is not printed in his lifetime at all, but here is our lovely title page of the folio. But as I said before, there's also a partial credit answer, which is that it was written at the beginning of his career, and there's something more that we will talk about with that. So you get partial credit if you went with the beginning. But it was not published on its own actually until 1631. And the reason why I wanted to bring this in is it gives us a little bit of information we don't have in the folio, as it was acted by His Majesty's servants, aka the King's Men, which was the company that Shakespeare was part of, at the Blackfriars and the Globe. So it was acted at both the indoor and the outdoor theater of the time. And what is, well, I'm going to wait and mention what is interesting about this being published on its own. But it is because, and this is the other reason why people might have gotten partial credit, there is this thing, a pleasant conceited history called the Taming of a Shrew. So this is not the Taming of the Shrew. It is usually called the Taming of a Shrew, and by the Earl of Pembroke, his servants, which has nothing to do with Shakespeare. You will note that this was published in 1596. It's one of 3 editions. It was popular enough that it was published 3 times in 1594, 1596, and 1607. But does this have anything in common with Shakespeare? Answer's a little bit. Sort of, kind of. I love this play. It is a weird little play because some scenes run very similar to it. And so people don't know what to make of it. People who really know what they're talking about can't decide if it is an adaptation of Shakespeare's play, if it is a second play based on the same Shrew, previous Shrew play that has now been lost, or whether it's just a terrible memorial reconstruction because the role of the tailor is almost perfect in both of them. However, if you go with that memorial reconstruction, you then have to cope with the fact that everything else is largely changed and not just, oh, I can't remember it, so I'm going to make it up. For instance, Petruchio is now Ferrando, not Fernando. for Ando, and his servant Grumio is now Sanders or Sander. Let's see, I've got him somewhere. Sander, I think. And Bianca becomes Amelia, and plots with the Lucentio and Tranio servant character change up a little bit. So you have more class commentary actually in this than you do in Taming of the Shrew. So if it was, like, it's so weird. There is no clear answer to this, and we probably never will have a clear answer. But what I love is this is a conversation right after Catherine's speech with this. Oh, Sander, there we go. I thought it was on there. So after they leave in Shakespeare's play, no female character speaks. She literally has the last word among the women. For this one, you get the Bianca character asking her husband why he looks so sad. And he's like, well, I say thou art a shrew. And here we get that famous phrase coming from the Bianca character at the very end, that's better than a sheep. So that is the last word from a woman in the play. And it's certainly ending with a very different note than Catherine's long speech. The other big thing about this is it starts with that same kind of induction scene, but that's kept up a few more times, and it actually ends the play. So you get this short passage at the very end after the scene with Catherine's long speech, and it's between enter two bearing Christopher Sly in his own apparel again, leaves him where they found him, then goes out, then enters the tapster. And they have this conversation where you find out that all that Christopher Sly learned from his dream in this time of being a lord is, I know now how to tame a shrew. I dreamt upon it all this night till now. And so I'll to my wife presently and tame her too, and if she anger me. And the tapster's like, okay, I want to see that. And so he goes with him to see what's going to happen. And it's left up to the audience if he is going to do a good job with this taming. And so I think this is a far more cynical, overtly cynical ending. But the interesting thing about Taming of a Shrew is this last scene has been brought in time and time again over the centuries when they have Christopher Sly in the induction at the beginning. Often productions will bring in these lines to give that play within a play, or the part that was watching the play, an ending. The other interesting thing about this is the company that brought this out, the Taming of a Shrew, they still held the rights for the Shrew play. And so when the first folio was created, money was given to this publisher for the play, even though it's pretty different. And this same publisher is the one to publish Shakespeare's Shrew in 1531. So it is kind of interesting that they get the credit for it, even though there are clear differences. Okay. So in terms of Shakespeare sources, we've talked a little bit about what shrews were considered at the time. So there are all kinds of folk tales out there about shrews that Shakespeare could draw from, and there have been some amazing studies. The first by Jan Harold Bronveld, and I really recommend checking out his writing if you're interested, because the number of stories about shrewish women, they got around. But there is this other really fascinating source, and that is the medieval mystery plays. Now, when I say mystery plays, if you know nothing about it, you go like, ooh, mysteries? Like who killed who? Oh no, this is mysteries as in the guilds or professions of a city. This is where you would tell the entire story of the Bible in one day, with each profession or mystery having its own cart, telling a single story from the Bible. This is an example, I think it's from Wakefield, with Noah and the Ark. different cities had different play cycles for this, but everybody had a story about Noah and the Ark, and it was typical that the shrewish character was Noah's wife. She gave him a hard time because he was building an ark, and then they're in the water in the middle of nowhere, and it's all his fault. And so Noah's wife is absolutely a key shrew in people's minds. And the same actually goes for Eve in the creation story and the Garden of Eve, because she's the one who led to original sin and convinced Adam to do all of this. So of course she must be a shrew. And another common shrew that was called out was, and I apologize if I'm butchering her name, Xanthippe. She is the wife of Socrates. Yes, that's Socrates. And there are many, I think 4 accounts of the life of Socrates, and in only one do they say anything bad about her. But basically they say she liked no one, she gave him a hard time, but he liked that. He was definitely a better a shrew than a sheep kind of guy. And once when she got mad at him, I don't remember what he was supposed to have done, but she supposedly threw a chamber pot on, emptied a chamber pot on his head, which you see depicted in this wood cutting from the same time, from Shakespeare's time period. And evidently Socrates took it in stride and says, after the storm comes the rain. Ba-dum-bum. Yeah.
So for future years, here's a question. The name Xanthippe also is in a pop culture television show that was popular over the past 5 or 6 years called the Kimmy Schmidt, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, where the teenage daughter who is a absolute teenager, in every sense of the word, i.e. might be a pain in the butt, is called Xanthippe.
Nice.
So there you go. See, I do know things. I'm smart.
Yay. It's crazy how these things come back over and over. So those are the famous shrews that are going out there. And there is actually a reference to Xanthippe in Taming of the Shrew by name, and says that Catherine is even worse than Xanthippe. So the clear source for all of the suitors of Bianca and bribing somebody to marry her and everything that goes along with this is from this set of 2 works, originally the Italian Ariosto I Suppositi from 1509, and its English translation from Gascoigne in 1566. If you look at those stories, there are so many things that are just line by line the same. It is clearly what Shakespeare is using. And with all of the stories out there about shrews and the folk tales, I want to highlight one in particular, and this is a ballad, a long lyric that was published circa 1580. That is amazing. You can read it on the British Library's website. They have these amazing photos of the work, but it is definitely a merry jest of a shrewd and cursed wife lapped in moral skin for her good behavior. You have a good sister and a bad sister. They pay somebody to marry the bad sister. By the way, this is the only other source where they warn him beforehand, like, are you sure you want to marry her? Even Shakespeare doesn't do that, but this one they warn him. But this one is a merry jest, all for domestic violence. And so when she's shrewish, he beats her up, and she's still shrewish, so he knocks her out. While she's knocked out, he goes and skins his horse and salts the skin and wraps her in the skin of the dead horse as a warning. I'm thinking Godfather a little bit. And then amazingly, she decides that she's going to act right. And she gives a speech at the end, very similar to the Shakespeare speech at the end. And again, this is a merry jest.
And see, you guys all thought that Shakespeare was the worst.
So no scold's bridle, no domestic violence in this. Actually, the only violence in the play comes from, well, he rings his servant's ear, but Katharina strikes him, and he has a line, "I swear I'll cuff you if you strike again." But he never hits her in the play. But yeah, this is Shakespeare's source material. So I'm not arguing that Taming the Shrew isn't problematic. I'm just saying Shakespeare could have made some worse choices with this. Okay. So going from the sources to the early history of the play, the one time that we know during Shakespeare's lifetime that it was performed is on June 11th, 1594 at Newington Butts. We also get a reference to it 2 years later for The Shrewd Wife. Read the book Taming a Shrew. Note that it's not the right title, which hath made a number of us so perfect that now everyone can rule a shrew in our country, save he that hath her. So everybody but the person who has the shrew can do it. So everybody knows how. Everybody's the Monday morning quarterback, but nobody seems to be able to tame their own wives. So I kind of like this reference. I appreciate Mr. Harrington there. So before I click on anything else, I have our next question to ask. And that is, what was the only sequel to one of Shakespeare's plays to be written during his lifetime? A bonus point for naming the writer. So you might be able to figure out what play it's sequel to, since we're here talking about Taming of the Shrew.
All right, I went ahead and I threw it into the chat for everyone to see. If you'd like to give it an answer, we'd love to hear it. And no answer is a bad answer. Whatever you think, we'd love to hear your guesses.
And I find it fascinating. Like, I didn't know for ages that there were any sequels to Shakespeare's plays. I mean, certainly we do that now all of the time. And so, but who knew that there was a legitimized version by Shakespeare's own company, performed by the same company? So.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I will let you know that we've got Maddie Mansuri and Tom Parkhill. I'm assuming that Tom is getting ready to jump in here for a little while because he just left his rehearsal. And Maddie and I are texting, and Maddie is also going to chime in for a bit. So when we get towards the end, we'll be able to talk to at least one of the directors about the current production that we've got going on. And so my question about the sequels would be like, and we're not talking about the histories, right? Because the histories have, the War of the Roses cycle.
No, this is a sequel written by someone other than Shakespeare.
Oh, okay. So a sequel.
No, those would be Shakespeare written sequels. This is a sequel by someone other than Shakespeare.
Okay. So did Ben Jonson write a sequel?
No, but that's an excellent guess.
All right. Well, that's the only guess I've got. What is it?
Okay. It is somebody else who is associated with Shakespeare in real life, and that is John Fletcher. And he wrote this play called The Woman's Prize, or The Tamer Tamed. It will not surprise you one bit to know that versions that are printed now just ignore the main title of The Woman's Prize and totally put The Tamer Tamed everywhere on their copies. But it takes three characters from the original play. You get Petruchio, Bianca, and Tranio, of all people. And it's set after Catherine has died. Evidently, she reverted to be completely shrewish, made every day for Petruchio miserable, but now she is dead. And he has married a new woman, Mariah. And so Bianca has a plan. She is going to convince Mariah to stand up to Petruchio to tame him instead, so that Mariah will have a happier life. And basically, Fletcher steals a bit from Shakespeare. Okay, Shakespeare steals from everybody, so it's fine to steal from Shakespeare. But he also steals from a little play that was a couple, maybe even already 2,000 years old. Lysistrata. Oh, not John Harrington, John Fletcher. But
Oops.
how dare you get it wrong? I know I didn't give him his name on here. Terrible. So with this, he steals Lysistrata, where the women vow to not have sex with the men until the war is over. And so the women hole up and stick together and try to also fight for Mariah's sister to get to choose who she is going to marry, because at the moment it's going to be an old rich guy that she doesn't want to have anything to do with. And so craziness ensues. But of course, Petruchio being Petruchio, he's not just going to lie down and take it. So everything escalates. And I personally love the fact that at one point he fakes his own death. And so you see him in a casket on stage, and he is trying to shame her, his new wife, Mariah, into admitting that she shouldn't have done any of this. But no, she realizes that he's just faking. And so she basically says, he's the worst guy ever. Let's go ahead and put him in the ground, and calls his bluff. And that is what tames him. He gets up and he acknowledges that she is smarter than he is. But because with all of this topsy-turvy stuff, we can't end by saying that's the way it should be. We have to write it. So she agrees to obey him after he has done this. So the idea is they're going to be equal in the future. But I love that Bianca is one of the generals in this, and lots of military terminology with this. And I love at the end of this quote, like a race of noble Amazons, we'll root ourselves into our endless glory, live and despise base men. And she is also really close to Tranio, which lends the possibility of setting up like a romance with them in Taming of the Shrew if you're performing these together. Now, we know for a fact that this was performed sometimes with Taming of the Shrew, which was written approximately 15 years earlier. This is from 1608, 1609. The other fascinating thing about John Fletcher being the one to write this is that he goes on to co-write several plays with Shakespeare, including Henry VIII or All Is True, and including the lost play Cardenio. And so we know Fletcher and Shakespeare worked together after this. But it's interesting, like, who knows whether Shakespeare was annoyed or what, and then got over it, or if he was wholly for this, because hey, it means they're doing his play again too. We do know that they continued to be put on together, and they were performed for the king in 1633, where Taming the Shrew was liked. But where the tamer was tamed, it was very well liked. So it is an interesting commentary on that. And those were the words of the king. So you never know with all of this. We assume that everyone would be anti-Shrew at the time period, but I don't think that there's any kind of monolith with this. Okay. So looking then at what people did with the play going forwards. This is a time before Shakespeare was Shakespeare and someone who is beyond making changes to. So he was still like just a good playwright. So in the same way that you might improve the current playwrights that are out there, other people thought they're going to make this better. And especially when we've got the war between the sexes, we're going to update it to how things are now. So we have these improvements. And the first one is really clearly connected to Taming the Shrew, right? Sawney the Scot Yeah, it doesn't sound like any connection to me either. Here is the thing. Remember in Taming of Shrew, his Petruchio's servant, instead of being Grumio, was Sander. Sander has a nickname, which is Sawney. And so basically, they give this servant all of the terrible jokes and really lean into the Scottish accent. And hey, you've got to play. So this is how it is brought back in the restoration. Rather than Taming the Shrew itself, you get this very silly play with a comic Scottish guy. And of course, you can't just settle for that. If we're going to do it, we're going to really lean into it. And we're going to make it more knockabout than it ever was before. So we're going to kind of take some ideas from Women's Prize Retain Retain. We're going to threaten her. She's no longer Catherine. She's now Margaret, because things. And we're going to threaten to pull her tooth if she doesn't behave. And then when that doesn't work, while she is standing right next to Petruchio, Petruchio is going to claim that she's dead. And here is the fun thing. Everybody around is so over her that they're like, okay, yeah, obviously she's dead. Let's go get a coffin and let's bury her right now. So only when she is under the threat of being buried alive does she recant and say that she is indeed tamed. Yeah, it's aged well. But I will say it's hilarious in a horrifying way. They went big. But the interesting thing is that long 44-line speech at the end of the play goes down to 2 lines. So you get the feeling, I mean, she's repented upon pain of being buried alive. So this taming is going to last about 5 minutes. You also get a reference to the tamer tamed in the epilogue. So it's really clear that you're going to see a shortened version of that right after this. The next version that is kind of interesting, if anybody here is familiar with the Beggar's Opera, where they took ballads and changed the lyrics and made them relevant to what was going on in the play. If you like Threepenny Opera, it was just a modernization of that. It inspired a ballad farce of this that is modified from Sonny the Scot called A Cure for a Scold. And I will say that that title hung on for longer than the play did. I hear, let me stop sharing for a second. One of the things I got when I got my PhD was this from 1810. And I like that Catherine Petruchio is the name of the adaptation then, but you still get it called A Cure for a Scold, even though this one wasn't that popular at the time. Now let me share my screen again. It makes me happy that, yeah, we have to cure the scold. And the violence got worse with this. They call for a physician to bleed her and to blister her, which was another similar treatment. And so Petruchio, who is now, he now has the amazing name of Mr. Manley. Unpack that how you will. Mr. Manley calls for her to have blisters all over her body, and the physician who is called on for this is that he plans to, and I quote, bleed her pretty plentifully in one of the veins under her tongue. That's when she decides, yeah, Caitlin, that is my face.
Okay, so here's the thing. This play being one of the, like we said, one of the shows that people have a nice little squabble about, yeah. Right? We don't know if it's good for now, if we don't want to do it anymore, if it doesn't say anything good. What I can say is that this feels like you could now tagline The Taming of the Shrew with "We've come a long way, baby." Mm-hmm. I mean, it is. All of these are, usually it doesn't ever feel like they're worse. It just feels like they're weirder. And this feels so much worse. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm shocked. I was unaware it could get worse. So this is definitely an advertisement for be careful what you wish for. And that's all I've got to say on that.
And one of the crazy things for this same play, it includes an epilogue where the actress who's just played Peg, which of course is from Margaret, nickname Peg, she professes that like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not the character. And you think she's going to say, because I would never want to be that shrewish. No, it goes on to like, she gave up so easily. And I'm like, okay, well, at least we're ending with that. Rock on. Yay, shrews. Yeah, if you can't tell from the shirt, I am still Team Shrew all the way. So before I click on any more, I think it is time for our next question, which is whose version of the play, and it's not either of these, it is a new one, replaced the Taming of the Shrew on stage for over 100 years. It is an adaptation, it is a cutting of it, but it stuck around for more than at least 100 years. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Okay, so if it stuck around for at least 100 years and it's not the restoration version, is it that early 1900s era where plays took like 5 hours because they had to have 2 hours of scene changes and stuff?
I love those. Sadly, there is not one that I know of that has any of those epic scene changes, but I will tell you that the last recorded version of this play happened with Tree, who is known, Herbert Beerbohm Tree, who is known for those and the worst offender of those. In 1879, he still used this cutting.
Okay, so it's a melodrama.
Yeah.
Okay, so a melodrama, for those of you who might not know, I mean, I know you know soap operas, right? But my college professor, Dr. Heather McMahon, said it the best, which is like I have a little bow tie, you know, it's like, you must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. And then a handsome gentleman shows up and says, I'll pay the rent. My hero. So it's like that. So it has a happy ending. All right, so can we give them one more clue before we give them all the answer?
Go names. Let's see. When all else fails, just name it after characters.
Oh, okay. So is it Catherine and Petruchio?
Yes, I totally gave a spoiler and I'm okay with that. So it is a
I was paying attention.
and Petruchio, though Catherine with a C. No longer Catherine with a K, Catherine with a C. And David Garrick, who is actually the guy who took Shakespeare from being a really cool playwright to the playwright. You'll see him next to the bust. He also created a temple for Shakespeare on the Thames. He's also the guy who got everybody into making pilgrimages to Stratford-upon-Avon. If you come back in 2 weeks when we talk about the First Folio, you have to talk about Garrick when it comes to the afterlife of the First Folio, so you can learn more about him. But he cut the play down into definitely a melodrama. In 1754, he took out all of the horrible behavior and gave us some decorum for the Georgian age that then worked well for the Victorian age as well. So with Catherine and Petruchio, we lose Petruchio's speech before he meets Catherine saying, I come to wive it wealthily, if wealthily, and then happily. That's too ungentlemanlike. Oh no, we can't do that. So we lose anything that would be a bit uncouth for this. And so certainly all of those terrible punishments are out. And it's less extreme. But one of my personal favorite things is because it wouldn't be delicate for Catherine to tell the other women what to do, the speech is given to Petruchio instead. And he ends the play by giving all of this completely straight-faced to tell the moral of the story. Yeah, it's a lot. And so, another important thing, and here is the guy who played Petruchio in his version, sorry. Another thing that he is responsible for is that before Indiana Jones, there was another character known for having a whip. and that is Petruchio. From when Garrick had his version, Petruchio had a whip. This whip was still around in 1960s productions. He would come on and whip this around, and she would do what he said. So thanks, Garrick. With this, Kimball, who worked with Garrick, then has his own slightly shorter version of this, but you get, yes, even more refined melodrama. I love this scene from the end of the wedding banquet. He pretends to be rescuing her when he's really kidnapping her and taking her away. That's the extremity of her outfit in one of the Mrs. Charles Kimball as Catherine. This was going around everywhere. It was not replaced anywhere until 1844, when you get the first of several kind of experimental versions that try going back to Shakespeare's text. But here's the thing, it wasn't very popular. So they were like, well, forget that. We're going to continue doing this. And so you even get productions by the great Shakespearean actor who's certainly not known for anything else, John Wilkes Booth. Yeah. If you don't know, he is part of a hugely famous Shakespearean acting family, and Edwin Booth, his brother, still is very famous. He is rightly famous. John Wilkes, not so much.
Yeah. If you would like to hear another strange John Wilkes Booth reference, come see Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged. Apparently, he's the tie between the two shows.
Wow. Who knew? Who knew? And I was just going to throw in one more adaptation, because the play was fairly popular in the Regency, The Honeymoon by John Tobin. And When You Can See Me, I have a bill for that at Theatre Royal Drury Lane as well. And it's one of many plots. There are all sorts of little romance plots, and it's one of a number of them. So with all of this, you're getting quote unquote improvements, but it's making it better for people. So first we curve toward the rough and tumble. Then it's take away anything that's indelicate, which was a general Shakespearean trend in the Victorian era anyway. We must be more refined, even if we're shrewish. So yeah, is as it is. But all of that changed starting in 1887 with this production by Ada Wren and Augustin Daly. So he is the first truly modern American stage director in the sense that we would think of it. Before that, it was all actor managers. He is not an actor. He is organizing everything so that there's all one main idea. Before this, each person did their own thing. You wouldn't have as much cohesion in a production as you do from this time forward. Of course, you get Chekhov and all sorts of things going on in Russia with this idea of director. But Daly was the one who really did this for Shakespeare in America. And Ada Wren, who was statuesque, tall, towered over the men, she became known for this part. She made her grand. She made Katharina grand. And she became known for this part because they experienced so much success. They kept on doing this. They started in America. They came over to London, and I'm actually lucky enough to have not one, but two of the programs for it that chart the rise of it, because the first one is at the Lyceum, which is Henry Irving's theater. The second is at Daly's Theatre in London. They've done well enough to buy a theater just to put on these productions. And so she does this part off and on, this production off and on between 1887 and 1905. And because they tour and travel, enough important people see that she becomes, and this production becomes, the one that everything is compared to, even as late as the 1920s. They're still saying, oh, it's not as good as Ada Wren. So it is interesting to see how she becomes the performance of it. And while they didn't have the full on set, this is pretty grand, I think. And the number of different backdrops to create that depth, pretty impressive. So another thing to mention with this time period is the women are increasingly wanting their rights, whether it's the right to vote, their rights within the household. So you get suffragettes using this, but also, and certainly no one would recognize this in the last 50, 60 years of America, once women get a bit more power, there is always some backlash to that. So this is a play that makes everybody happy because you can have her being really strong, but you can also have Petruchio taming her and making it better for that backlash. And all three of these sets of people that are on here, Constance and Frank Benson, married couple, Southern and Julia Marlowe, and Oscar Ashe and Lily Brayton, all of these people toured for years in these roles and were really well known for them. I also, by the way, let me stop sharing for a second. I really love, this is one of the postcards. This is Frank Benson in his crazy wedding getup. You definitely would want to marry this guy. And it has on the back a Stratford upon Avon stamp for 1905. But yeah, definitely trust in him. He's the guy to listen to in all matters, obviously. So with these, I also love the looks on all of these women's faces for to see exactly how frustrating they are. By the way, Oscar Ashe and Lily Brayton absolutely used the scene with Christopher Sly. I actually have a picture of Oscar Ashe, who becomes Petruchio, in the Christopher Sly getup. So that's going on. You also increasingly get movies. And D.W. Griffith, one of the early kings of movies, did a short in 1908. Unfortunately, I've been unable to find it, or maybe fortunately, considering the rest of his body of work. But there are also a number of short films that are made, including this one from 1915, Taming Mrs. Shrew, about modern shrews and taming them. So there's clearly a lot of interest going on with all of this, whether it's in a Shakespearean production or in an adaptation. So at the same time, you can clearly see that this play works well for couples. So my next question, I'm going to go ahead and ask it now, but I'm not going to take answers yet. So what golden couple, famous couple, broke up as a result of filming The Taming of the Shrew? So what famous couple broke up because of this? And as you're thinking about it, I'm actually going to give you three options. So go ahead and answer whenever you want.
Oh no, I came up with three options. I did. Okay, so if we launch it, I came up with three options.
Okay, go ahead and launch it and let's see.
I'm pretty proud of them.
Okay. Well, two of those are going to appear in this, so I think we're okay. And the other one that I'm going to have on our screen is stage version. So I think we're okay. Okay. But if you answer the other one, I might worry about you. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. So we can leave that up. But the first one I want to mention is actually the first sound Shakespeare film. There were silent films aplenty of all of the plays beforehand, or at least of a lot of the plays. But the very first one is Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. And Mary Pickford had been America's sweetheart. They had, together with Charlie Chaplin, founded the United Artists, UA, which is still around. studio. So this is a strong woman and a strong man. They've been a power couple since the teens, and this is their first sound film. It actually was going to go into production as a silent film, and then they transferred it. And I will say it goes much closer to the Garrick cut, but we have lots of silliness, as you can see by his lovely attire, including a boot on his hat. I kind of want a boot hat now. So this came out in 1929. So this is your first option. A second option, which is definitely the right one, even though it doesn't appear on the multiple choice, but definitely the right one. This is the Broadway golden couple, the leading lady and the leading couple of Broadway, Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine. They toured in this for years and years and years. And in fact, this was a crazy production where basically anything goes. It also definitely wasn't, it would not go over well now. I know that, for instance, a dwarf was used for comic effect. So that, yeah, it would be a bit.
How? As who? Why?
Just
how?
I think at Petruchio's house, when they go back and crazy things occur with his servants.
Okay.
So this is literally knockdown slapstick comedy, and they did this for, I think, around 10 or 15 years. It also inspired another show that we're going to talk about, but probably the most famous couple to do the play, or at least in modern terms, is Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, with the Zeffirelli version of Taming of the Shrew, that was all filmed in Italy at Cinecittà. And it also was right after the famous Romeo and Juliet. So he did these back to back, just a year after the other. And so any guesses about which of these couples' marriages ended? It's hard.
So we do have a guess.
Shrew.
We have a guess on Facebook for Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
That's a good
and then
guess.
we also have a guess on for Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks.
Good guesses.
So those are the two we've got. So I just thought, like I'd throw in Julia Stiles and Heath Ledger in there because maybe somebody, maybe somebody knows something we don't know. I don't know.
I would love to learn more about that. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I was pretty proud of myself. I was like, oh, this is easier if I have options. And so I started making options. And at least I was close. But yeah, so
it's about two of the three. I love it.
Were Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton married?
Twice.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna guess Mary Pickford.
Yeah, because you would totally think it is Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, but this actually caught them on one of their happy times. In fact, she gives the final speech absolutely sincerely, and it shocked Zeffirelli and Burton, who thought she was going to be sarcastic with it. There is proof from both of them that they were not expecting that at all. But because a combination of Mary Pickford, who was also a producer on this film, taking the lead and trying to tell him what to do, and also then being forced into a slightly different reading of the character that she didn't love, it didn't last past then. And their careers didn't last too long into the sound film either, sadly. But it was a big deal. Okay, actually, we're going to do a quick turnaround with a question. And before I click on this, for the next one, I want to see if anybody can name the writer of a musical Shrew adaptation who is also responsible for giving the world Girl Scout cookies.
So I actually also came up with guesses for this one. I'm not nearly as proud of this.
Okay. So,
but it is a bit of a stumper, I think.
Okay, so with this one, I can go ahead and at least click on the next one on the next page without giving away too much of this. But any guesses as well, if you'd prefer, about what the musical is? And I will say it's the one that was inspired by Lunt and Fontaine's antics.
It was also according to my mother, part of my my name being Caitlin and what I was named as a kid, which was Kate.
Nice.
Katie was from this musical, which I found out when I was auditioning for colleges and for conservatories at the end of high school, and I insisted on singing the song "I Hate Men." So after insisting to sing that, my mother said, "I knew I nicknamed you Katie for a reason."
Well, I will say this musical, Kiss Me Kate, with a book by Samuel and Bella Spivak. So sorry for anybody who was saying D.W. Griffith. This was my introduction to the Taming of the Shrew, and it may have been one of my introductions to Shakespeare. I loved musicals, and this is one that I know part of that the final speech that you're like, I don't remember a word of it. Well, she says it at the end. Catherine Grayson says it at the end of the movie. And so I know it from watching the movie too many times. But it absolutely uses the show backstage and in front of the stage. And I will go ahead and reveal that Bella Spivak, before she got married, was working for the Girl Scouts of America, and she was helping them with marketing as well as fundraising. And it was kind of a combination of the two, where she evidently was the person who suggested that they sell cookies. So I truly love Kiss Me Kate. So it's hard for me to decide which of her gifts to the world was better. I also really love the old Cary Grant movie called My Favorite Wife that they co-wrote together as well. But yeah, you can decide. It's probably the Girl Scout cookies, but I still really love the show. So here are some of the pictures from the movie, which is set up as the two Broadway legends who are getting a divorce are thinking about putting on the show, while he is involved with the person playing Bianca. So she is doing this much against her will, although she gets top billing. She does definitely use that. And so things are taking place both backstage and when two gangsters show up, forcing her to be on stage. Wacky hijinks ensue. If you're familiar with the amazing song Brush Up Your Shakespeare, that's from this as well. Sorry, I have to give it plenty of time. And also remember Garrick thing with the whip. This was the initial symbol with the heart on it. I actually have an original Broadway program for this with that symbol as well. So yeah, a whip with a heart. So it's been revived several times on Broadway, and I love that they went with boxing for the marketing for this early 2000s revival. So we've got that. And now I want to make sure I wasn't going ahead to ruin a question, but we can go ahead, because here is the weird thing about Kiss Me Kate and several other adaptations. As Caitlin said before, like, they get weirder. And so along with the whip, one of the things that became associated with Taming of the Shrew and its adaptations becomes spanking the woman who is not doing what she is supposed to do. So in the play, it's done in front of the audience as if it's part of the shrew, when it's actually not. She just hit him and he's not happy about it. This scene is not in the film of Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, with the amazing rom-com director Ernst Lubitsch, known for, and I quote, that Lubitsch touch, which becomes a slightly different thing when he's coaching how Gary Cooper should spank Claudette Colbert. You also get John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, who had a kind of Taming the Shrew relationship in Quiet Man, and then came back together in 1963. I should say the same year that Sex and the Single Girl was published. Maybe even the same month, I think within 2 months of the two. So backlash is real. all of these are in the publicity campaigns, by the way. So I also wanted to briefly mention my favorite version of this, which is the Royal Shakespeare Company 1978 version. I'll talk a little bit more about what happens at the beginning of this, but it's a really bleak, then modern day version that had Jonathan Pryce and Paola Diancetti. But I have forever absolutely loved this page from the program, from the playbill of this, that is the size of a comic book, and where she is clearly over all of this when they are so impressed by her transformation. So again, I'll talk more about it in a minute, but wanted to bring that in. It clearly was a dark production. Both of these are from there. You can kind of see the influence of The Godfather on the production as well. And interestingly, when she puts her hand underneath his foot, he becomes absolutely disgusted. He has broken this amazing woman, and now she's basically a Stepford wife. And so it ends on a very dark note where he is appalled by his own behavior. This is not the only dark reading of it. There's an interesting all-female cast at Shakespeare's Globe with Janet McTeer as Petruchio, that really explored the negative impact of assumptions for male behavior throughout. And this production from the RSC in 2007 and then transferred in 2008 got so much frustration from critics who said it is unrelentingly bleak. I mean, it has just over-the-top comic violence, but by the end, you feel so bad about it that it's made a really valid point, but it also makes you never want to see the play again. So you can go really far, but you also risk losing your audience with this. One that went far but didn't turn off critics quite so much is this that was set in Ireland in the 19-teens, when the women there were struggling to get the vote. This is from 2016. And they're literally caging her in as they're putting on the layers of her wedding dress. But by the end, it ended the way that all plays at Shakespeare's Globe end, with a jig. Everybody dances. And with this one, she doesn't. She is in the center of the stage. She is absolutely broken by her experience. And everybody is doing a jolly dance around her while she is just in torment. Two that went even further than that, I want to briefly mention Charles Merowitz's play The Shrew juxtaposes scenes from Shakespeare's Shrew and scenes from a modern relationship and made it as bleak as it possibly could be. It's a fascinating but truly disturbing read. But the prize goes to a production by the State Theater of Turkey in 1986, where the director, Yücel Ertin, was voluntold that he was going to be putting on this play. He thought that it was not an okay play for modern audiences. So after a slapstick comic play, in the last scene, Catherine is so upset that her husband has bet on her and really let her down in this way that she keeps her hands covered until the end, but she reveals that she has slit her wrists and then actually bleeds to death on stage, which ends the play. Doesn't get much more bleak than that. And again, not adding any lines, just having an interpretation. Caitlin, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I wish I had been able to put up a trigger warning for that for people. But yeah, no, that's pretty terrifying. I hate that.
So that is as bad as it gets. We're going to go then. You may see a hint here. Our next question was, what famous British comedian played it surprisingly straight-laced as Petruchio in the 1980 BBC Complete Works television movie of The Taming of the Shrew? Sorry, spoilers, maybe not. So
All right, I've put that in the chat for everybody. Please feel free to type out type out some guesses. Oh, you have the picture.
Yeah,
it's funny.
That's okay. It is definitely LL Cool J is the answer.
Oh.
No.
Okay, no, I didn't no, that wasn't what I was gonna guess because it's
Okay. Yeah.
in the late 80s BBC version.
1980.
Oh, it's definitely
Yeah.
then it's definitely not LL Cool J.
I know.
Oh,
He
okay.
in his teens when he rose to superstardom in the late 80s. I realize this. But
Okay, great. So the picture, I don't know that guy's name, the dude with the hat, but I will say, well, there's a couple of hats, but what I will say is that when we were having a conversation about this pre-rehearsal with the two directors, I remember saying like, okay, well, what do you want his hat to look like? And Tom Parkhill notoriously hates putting hats on stage. And he was like, well, he doesn't have to have a hat. And I was like, of course he has to have a hat. And the spoiler here is that you have to come see the show to know if he has a hat because I don't know the answer to that. But this is the picture that I showed was the picture of this guy, this surprisingly straight-laced Petruchio player, British comedian, whose name utterly escapes me. I do not know. So what is it?
Think Monty Python, think Faulty Towers, Basil Fawlty.
You just ain't gonna embarrass me. What?
John Cleese.
John Cleese. There we go. Yes, that name now sounds familiar.
We can't leave out the Fish Called Wanda. So yes, they expected him to come in and do wild and crazy things, as this costume choice would suggest. And surprisingly, he just basically played a therapist to help Catherine become her true self. And this is a trend. You get this in a production with Fiona Shaw later on in the 80s, where the Catherine is just so unhappy with her life, whether or not she realizes it. And the Petruchio helps her realize how much better her life could be, and acts like a therapist to unlock her potential. And Deliver Us from Eva with LL Cool J and Gabrielle Union definitely takes that route. And I love the fact that her Shrew character is a restaurant inspector, where she actually gets paid to be properly uptight. But the guy's dating her sister. Her sisters disagree. So in addition to therapists, another popular choice now is having the two people just be a pair of outsiders who finally they see each other in themselves. They find a way to be happy. They find a safe place. And that's certainly true in 10 Things I Hate About You. That's lots of recent productions go this route. And this is from RSC production that did that very much with not only Catherine Petruchio, but also Bianca and Tranio, even though they don't end up together. And I thought that was an interesting choice. But then it's kind of unfair that she has to marry the richer Lucentio. So I had mentioned before the Christopher Sly and all of these framing devices. So some of them use Christopher Sly, some of them use this excuse to go crazy and find something else that makes it a play within a play. And my personal favorite is that 1978 production I mentioned before. And it's because at the beginning of the play, you get this ridiculous Italianate set that looks like something from Kiss Me Kate. But then at the beginning of the play, there is a situation after everybody else is set down. You get a drunk guy who wants to sit in the front of the auditorium, and he's having a fight with the usher, who says, you don't have a seat, you're being disruptive, don't do this. And it all escalates. He manages to break onto the stage, where he then breaks the entire set in the first 2 minutes of the show. And it goes from that to this bare bones set that is minimal and much more modern. And surprise, surprise, the guy who had been the drunk guy causing a problem becomes Petruchio, who then comes in on his motorbike, and the usher becomes Catherine. And I can't imagine how that would have been if you're watching it before all the reviews come out, before it's spoiled, how effective that might be. So a lot of productions have included the Christopher Sly one. This from 95 includes the Catherine actress Josie Lawrence being the tapster who throws him out of the pub at the beginning, but then he comes back to her silently since there weren't words in the folio text, and seems to feel terrible about what all he has watched. Sometimes they don't learn their lesson. This production from 92, they had all of the rich people who looked like they would be friends with Charles and Camilla, having touring players put this on, and they even have one of their own. They push her into playing the widow in the final scene. She thinks that she's over all of these antics, so she actually goes with all of the players at the end and thinks that they're ridiculous. But possibly my favorite from that really dark 2008 production, 2007 in Stratford, 2008 in London, it starts out with a lads' night out, stag night, as they call it in Britain, bachelor's party. And they come out and do a Maori haka, or a parody of it, which includes mooning the audience. And this was so offensive that it actually got letters of protest from Maori tribes asking them to change it. But man, it does establish a bad behavior of lads culture with it. So two more I want to mention very quickly. One from 2003, where they put on both the Taming of the Shrew and then the Tamer Tamed, so that you didn't have to worry about making it work with the first one, because you knew people were going to go and watch Petruchio get tamed right afterwards. This other version, directed by Justin Audibert for 2019, turned the whole society from a patriarchy to a matriarchy. They flipped the gender for almost every single part. And so the women would have been used to war and everything in the way that men traditionally would have, and the women had been really sheltered. And it was interesting to see, once you shift that assumption, how the rest of the play falls out. And this one is available on DVD. I encourage you, if you're able to, watch it. Really interesting. So a few outliers, and we're in a minute going to have our last question. I'll let you know when. So the first one is one of the most famous shrews in Hollywood, and early Hollywood, was Katharine Hepburn, because she was seen to be so mannish and everything, and she actually participated in 1950s circus style production. I love this picture of her jumping. At the beginning of Meryl Streep's career, she and Raul Julia participated in Taming the Shrew at Shakespeare in the Park in New York, and they actually made a behind-the-scenes documentary, not knowing how big Meryl Streep and Raul Julia were going to get. And so it is really fascinating to watch. I think it's available on YouTube. And that's not the weirdest casting of Taming of the Shrew at Shakespeare in the Park. This is from 1990, where they have Morgan Freeman, voice of God, with Tracy Ullman, British comic, who is probably now most famous for having her sketch comedy be where The Simpsons debuted, before it spun off into its own show, as in a Wild West version. Yes, I would love to see that. This one I want to mention, if you're familiar at all with animated Shakespeare, it is a series. They did, I think, 12 of Shakespeare's plays, each one animated in a different way. Taming the Shrew might be my favorite, because her hair comes alive and reacts the way that she reacts, when she is furious and tense, her hair gets tense and shakes. When she is angry, it will act like snakes and like hiss at people. It's wonderful. But now it is time, if you can put up that next question. What TV show from the 1980s had an entirely Shrew-based episode entitled Atomic Shakespeare? Yep, they took a time out from their regularly scheduled storylines. And the options are A, Cheers, B, Dallas, C, Moonlighting, or D, Remington Steele. And they use...
All right, give me just 1 second and
Okay.
I'll be able to get it up there. So sorry about that.
They use the relationships of the characters to make it even better. But interestingly, the screenwriters had shopped it around to several different shows. It didn't just come from the story room and writers of that show originally. So again, what TV show from the 1980s had an entirely Shrew-based episode entitled Atomic Shakespeare? Is it A, Cheers, B, Dallas, C, Moonlighting, or D, Remington Steele?
All right, we've got that up there now. Okay, so I remember watching Cheers when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I don't feel like I mean, I guess I might just be a little too young. I don't know. I was born in 88. Please don't come for me. So I don't know. I know that I had friends growing up who were named after characters in Dallas, for certain. Yeah, I'm trying to think about other. So one of the things that I did notice on your pictures of other versions was an ABC Family Original 10 Things I Hate About You remake.
Yes, they actually did 2 seasons of a TV show of it, and with the Patrick Verona character played by the grandson of, oh shoot, all of a sudden his name left me. He's actually in several things that are coming out soon. Shoot, tip of my tongue, I can see him. Roman Holiday, Gregory Peck. It's Gregory Peck's grandson. So useful trivia. And I think Larry Miller plays the father figure for the TV show as well as for the film. He came back for that. So any takers on the TV show? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and reveal it.
Go for it.
So it is Moonlighting. So with this lovely thing from an idea by William Budd Shakespeare, but you have Bruce Willis in full glory as Petruchio. It's making fun of the Zeffirelli film, but it's actually a really good adaptation. So if you're able to watch it, it's from season 3 of Moonlighting. It was available on DVD for a while. I'm not sure if it's streaming anywhere. It is fascinating. And there's also a 2007 Shakespeare Retold series of 4 of the movies, 4 of the plays. The one for Taming of the Shrew, I love this one, with Shirley Henderson, best known as Moaning Myrtle from Harry Potter, and Rufus Sewell. She plays a member of Parliament whose sister and mother are both supermodels, and it is absolutely fascinating. It is a weird little movie, and I love it. So yeah, if
all of the Shakespeare Retold versions are my favorite. The Taming of the...
Yeah. I don't love Midsummer Night's Dream. I love all of the others.
Yeah, I love the Taming of the Shrew version. If you want to, you know, get some people who don't love Shakespeare, aren't totally into it, to like guide them into Shrew, I think that Taming of the Shrew is absolutely wonderful. It's very funny, and it's all in you know, wholly modern context. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes with those, they will take storylines and take points and moments that just don't and aren't good, don't feel right, feel sort of weird, you know. They'll take those moments and kind of put them on their head. And so if you come see it and you see me at the table, behind the table, selling t-shirts and giving away our wares, I encourage you to stop and tell me what you found that it was, because that's definitely got at least one or two of those moments in that Shakespeare Retold. So yeah, that's my vote. Go watch that one. I can't wait to watch the animated one. That looks so much fun.
Oh, it's good. It's good. So at this point, any production or adaptation of The Taming of the Shrew has this series of things that you have to think about. And so difficulties or obstacles. And the first and foremost is, what is Catherine's problem? Does she have a problem, or is it a problem of the people around her? Also, what is Bianca's personality like? Is she obnoxious? Is she kowtowing to how she's supposed to behave? Or is it possible to have a good relationship between these sisters, or are they always going to fight? What is Petruchio's motivation? In Shakespeare's play, he says, I come to wive it wealthily in Padua, if wealthily then happily. But is that his only motivation? And how mercenary is he? How violent or serious is this play? Or is it the absolute opposite? How do you play the final speech? How do you deal with it? And is there a happy ending? Is that possible? So with this, all of these considerations are there, and we have to ask, where does it go? And for this, I want to bring in something that I normally bring in at the beginning, which is 3-panel Shakespeare. I really love this artist, and Maya Gosling has created this, and it's Katharina hates Petruchio, Petruchio crushes Katharina's spirit, and then Petruchio and Katharina live happily ever after, ? And I love both of their eyebrows. This to me is the tension of the play. What do you do with this in this day and age? And I also, just because, have to include this. This is my favorite crazy outfit, and by the way, I have a version of this in color. It's not as good in color. We need the black and white for it. But Grumio's outfit just makes me happy. This is Michael Siberry, and let me give Grumio his credit. Robin Nedwell from the 1995 production. I love and adore it. And this brings us to now this production at Ijams this summer, and I thought I would conveniently put up the days of the performance for Taming of the Shrew, including the matinee, so you can be inspired to go get tickets after we hear more about this production. And I do believe we now have one of the directors with us, right?
So we absolutely did, and then we lost her. That's okay. So for a minute, I'll talk about it while we're working on getting Maddie back, with Madison Mansuri back with us. Taming of the Shrew is kind of been Tennessee Stage Company's anniversary production. We've ended up doing it every 5 years or so for the past, oh gosh, I don't know how long. It was actually the very first production that Tennessee Stage Company ever did back in 1990 at the World's Fair Amphitheater in World's Fair Park.
And believe it or not, I remember going to see it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Our tickets were $5, and it starred two people who, if you are a local Knoxvillian or you spend some time in Tennessee, you might recognize their names. Jane Morgan formerly of Flying Anvil Theater, and Mark Creeder, who is the theater director and educator professor out at Tennessee Tech University, being one of our original founding board members, original members of Tennessee Stage Company. Tom loves this show, as do a lot of other people. Like we said, we've had a couple of people who have said, like, oh, we shouldn't be doing that show anymore. We really need to think of some other things. And then we've had other folks who, every time we mention we're doing it, just levitate out of their seats with excitement. So I'm excited to see what Tom and Madison have done with the show. Madison Mansuri, for those of you that came out and saw our Knoxville Shakespeare on the Hill production of Richard II, Madison co-directed that with Tom as well. And Madison, this is her second show co-directing with Tennessee Stage Company. And I'm super happy that she's here. Maddie's on the phone, actually. So I'm just going to unmute you, Miss Madison. So Madison, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then tell us a little bit about your favorite part of the show so far.
So my name's Madison Mansouri. I'm currently a senior at the University of Tennessee, graduating this spring. Very excited. I've been a longtime friend of Tennessee Stage Company, and it's been such a pleasure to finally be able to work on stage and off stage with the team. I think my favorite thing about this Shrew, other than the cast, is just incredible. Everyone worked so hard and they're so into this show, which I was a little nervous about, knowing just how problematic the show can be at a textual level and at a cultural context. We decided early on Tom and I had this idea of having Kate and Petruchio be the ones we're rooting for versus, wanting him to tame Kate, or for Kate also to not be tamed, instead of coming at it as two oppositions, finding the cohesive nature of them. Also, something really interesting with the show is the age and generational dynamic that's being brought out with Caroline and Bianca and Petruchio and the servants. Our Bianca and our Kate are not the same age as you would think of sisters being, for lack of a better term. So there's been a lot of fun dynamics with that interplaying, and we've called it the game. Is the game Petruchio and Kate play with their wooing. It's the game, it's the dance, it's the thing they do well, and they happen to find each other in a very cool way of just being and working together, which has been really fun. Caroline King and Joe Casterline are Kate and Petruchio respectively, and they keep bringing new fun ideas to this idea that just started out as a concept. And so I'm very excited to see where it keeps going and growing. Oh yes, there they are. Caitlin, I can't hear you.
Well, that's embarrassing. So, sorry about that. So just for some context, here's a rehearsal shot from very early on in the process. As you can see, they still have their books in their hands. But we have Caroline King standing up in the corner of the photo, Echo Wallace, Joseph, oh my gosh, what is? Tyler Givens, and Malik Baines, and then also Joe Casterline. You guys might recognize Joe from, I don't know, the past 20 years on the square. And Joe has been with us for quite some time. So you'll you'll recognize some faces that have come back, Tyler being our newest face. And then in the back corner back there, we've got Mr. Barry Wallace. So that is a photo of it's nighttime, I tell you. That's the sun, not the moon.
It's that one.
Yeah.
It's a very fun scene that just has continued to keep growing. So
absolutely. And then here is an overhead shot of the rehearsal that day, so you can see some folks that you guys might recognize. Helena Jordan here down in the bottom corner, Gray Casterline returning to us. Gray this year is playing Tranio. Tranio. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Gray is also our fight choreographer.
Yes.
So any fun little moves you see, Gray and the cast actually came up together. It's been a very collaborative experience with fight choreography in the show, because so much of it has to be organic, to almost not be as violent in some ways and more violent in other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you care to take a second to talk about violence in this show, Maddie?
Yeah. So one of the hard parts of this show is finding out what is violent and what is fun. And so that has kind of been an overarching question we've had. And from that, we decided early on that the fights were going to be organically found. So instead of it being Gray coming in which oftentimes with like sword fighting or dagger fighting, it is, here are these moves that have been blocked out that you are going to follow to X, Y, and Z, because these are weapons and these are things of safety. And what it's happened is Gray would come in during just moments where we were like, this might need something here, like a bop on the head. And a lot of the violence is almost funny in a lot of ways. There's a lot of lightness to it that surrounds it. Something that came from this organic collaboration kind of structure was the servants at Petruchio, which oftentimes are very violent. They're funny, as I'll get out, but there is a level of violence to them. And so it's become almost like the most family dynamic you can think of with violence. We jokingly in one rehearsal went, okay, who's the oldest sibling? Who's the youngest sibling out of these three servants, which are Echo, Wallace, August King, and Tyler T. Glover. And so we found that kind of dynamic. And from that, sped on, like, how do they interact? What is their violent level and why are they? And
Yes.
it's truly like this little, like, oh, we jokingly have also started calling Petruchio dad in this scenario. I don't know if Joe knows this, so now Joe will know this.
Well, we'll see if Joe watches. Don't anybody tell him. Yeah, and so it is, and it's funny, Gray being the father to one of the children, which is Gray Casterline, in our fight choreographer. So, you know, it all seems to come full circle in that joke, right? And one of the things that we discussed earlier while Madison was in rehearsal was the violence against Kate, particularly, in this show, and how indeed we learned from other versions of it after that this is the better of all the worlds, which I never thought was going to happen. But Madison, would you do me one last favor and maybe talk a little bit about your favorite line in the show or your favorite moment in the show so far that might get the audiences excited to come see it?
Oh gosh.
Put her right on the spot.
Through my entire list of my favorite moments. I think one of my favorite lines is when Gremio says, "My cake is dough." It's just very funny. And the way it's delivered in context of everything that has just happened, it's one of my favorite moments. I think one of my favorite things has just grown is Kate's handkerchief and the usage of Kate's handkerchief. And now the usage of Bianca's fan. So if you know fan language, you get to come in and say, I know what that means. And how the women also hold power within their delicacies.
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited to see Helena Jordan come and play the tailor, who also plays the widow at the end, which is the part that I played last time we did the show. And so I'm very excited to see Helena Jordan. And for those of you who might have not caught, it was something I meant to say because I was looking to see if I had a picture of Eleanor. But Eleanor has participated and played with us for the past few years, since 2020. Eleanor, who is playing Bianca, Eleanor Weedman, is all of 19 years old. Whereas our Kate is, you know, over the age of 35, right? Women of a certain age. Meaning that moment where Bianca comes out and says, like, you're supposed to be gone, you're not supposed to be here, really feels to resonate a little bit more, because it's like, you're a middle-aged woman, why are you in my house? As opposed to other instances where, you know, you think of 10 Things I Hate About You, where like one of them's a senior and the other one's a sophomore, you know, but this idea that you know, that 18-year-old rage is real if you have a teenager, or you remember being a teenager and you haven't forgotten. It's hard. It's the worst thing on the planet. We are terrible to teenagers in general. So I'm super excited to see this production and to be able to showcase that. I'm also really glad to be able to give Caroline a chance to play this role that is so much more, I think, potent when you get to have the commentary of like, aren't I allowed to be funny? You know, aren't I allowed to crack jokes? And that kerchief, you guys actually might have noticed in that photo that I showed, where Caroline's hand is up like this. It's blurred, but that's the kerchief, and it's blurred because she's about to throw it at Joe. Yeah, so that's that. Thank you so much, Madison. I'll let you get safely home from rehearsal, and I'll take a moment to tell everybody about the rest of the season and the tickets and how to get them and all and whatnot. We do open way sooner than I feel like I'm ready for, but the actors are definitely ready, and the audiences seem to be ready as well. So thank you so much, Madison. We'll talk to you soon.
See you guys. Come see Shrew
Bye.
and Works this summer.
Absolutely. All right. So, just to talk about the dates and how to get tickets. Let me pull up all of my million screens that I've got going over here. I apologize if I leave my camera on and you see me looking around. I don't mean to do that. I apologize. So, with our upcoming, oh, I'm so sorry. I've got to get back in here. My bad.
Do you want me to share my screen that has a list of those dates?
No. That's okay. That is all right. I've got it right here. I just wanted to get back into the live in Facebook. So sorry about that. Wonderful. So the show opens up on Thursday the 20th. That will be Taming of the Shrew, Thursday, July 20th, and then on Friday, July 21st, will be The Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged. That's directed by me and stars 3 of our favorite performers, including someone new to us. So if you are interested after you check out Taming of the Shrew and you would like to have some more irreverent, very irreverent fun, we encourage you to come check us out for that as well. And the tickets can be found at www.ijams.org/Shakespeare. You can also visit TennesseeStage.com/tickets, and that will take you directly there. If you visit our website, up in the right-hand corner, you'll be able to see a place to get tickets, and you'll be able to check them out there. One of the things that we are doing this year, in contrast to previous years, is for the past several years, we have spent about 5 weeks playing outside. And this year, we have had to make a little bit of a compromise. So we're going down to 4 weeks, which means you've got less time to see these 2 wonderful shows. But what we were able to do is to provide Pay What You Can Thursdays. During the run of the shows, including opening night, each Thursday night will be a Pay What You Can presentation. Everything from nothing to $5, $10, $25, even $50, whatever it is that your family might have to spare. Thursday nights have been a night where we love to play because for a lot of people in the service industry or maybe other performers, they might not get a chance to see any other show but a Thursday night. So we encourage you to come down to Ijams and check us out then. We will have 2 matinee shows, and all of that information is available on our website at TennesseeStage.com, and that's full spelled out, TennesseeStage.com. The tickets we also have available for those of you for whom Thursdays are impossible and ticket prices present an issue. You can email us at community@TennesseeStage.com, community@TennesseeStage.com, and we have some funds set aside to help those who would love to see the show but can't quite afford the ticket price. We would love to be free, which is something that we are all working towards. And we would love to be able to ensure that we are providing humor to every humor and education and enrichment to our community in general. So please come check us out there. Our next Shakesology is something different than we've ever done. Well, it is different. This is a year of 2 brand new ones, right? So we did our little mini Shakesology where you guys got to listen to me be the smart one for once. And then our second one. So Jennifer, since we can't really do a 2.5 hour session on every play Shakespeare has ever written, but we are going to do it with 3 actors in under 90 minutes. Since we can't do it with just the 2 of us in 2.5 hours, talk about our Shakesology that's coming up on the 22nd.
Absolutely. So to go along with the Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged, it just so timed out perfectly that it's that 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's First Folio, which is the book that had 36 of Shakespeare's plays 18 of which had never been published before. So without this book, we wouldn't have Macbeth, we wouldn't have The Taming of the Shrew, we wouldn't have The Tempest, so many of those wonderful plays. And so this is going to be a chance to find out a little bit more about the history behind this book, as well as how Shakespeare became what we think of with Shakespeare, with jazz hands, Shakespeare. And also those first folios, presumably around 750 of those were created. That's what experts think. And not that many remain, but more than you would think. Over 200 are still out there. And so those copies are literally worth millions of dollars, even if they're not complete, even if they're just partial. And it is absolutely insane. So we're going to look at some of the craziness involved with creating the folio, creating Shakespeare from Shakespeare, and what has happened with all of the folios since then. So hopefully it will go along really well with the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged, and also be the perfect opportunity to celebrate 400 years of this book and how it has changed so much of our culture.
Absolutely. Up here on the screen, I am sharing information about the show for you to be able to see it. And our wonderful poster over here, I am pretty proud of it. I designed it myself. And I had a lot of fun drawing a lute and then making a broken lute. So if you see there, the lute that's referenced, that we referenced earlier, where offstage Bianca breaks a lute over one of her suitors' heads. And then also here, in coming up with a design for the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged, one of the things I love to do as a designer, because I am not, I'm a great graphic designer, but I am not necessarily a great digital artist. One of the things I love to do is to take pieces of our history as a company and the history of Shakespeare and include them as like Easter eggs and things like that. So the image that you see right here, which shows a little digital Shakespeare holding William Shakespeare holding a quill coming out of a book. He is coming out of a digital illustration that I did of the copy of the first folio that sold at Sotheby's a few years ago for several $1 million, for about $4 million, I think. And then that little man coming out was a Shakespeare icon that we used early on at Market Square, where he was coming out of a manhole dripping in sewer water. And so I cleaned him up, gave him a nice crisp outfit, and had him pop out of a book instead. Just to give you some more context in regards, now that we've spent all of this time talking about the Taming of the Shrew, to close it off, we'll talk about real quick about the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged. This production is brought to you was originally produced by the Reduced Shakespeare Company over in England. It is 3 actors do all of Shakespeare's plays in 90 minutes. It is, I will say, a good solid PG-13 rating. If you have spent a ton of time listening to Jennifer and I talk about the complete works, about Shakespeare in general, then one of the things that you will have picked up on is that a lot of Shakespeare is really just very crude jokes about waste and human body parts. Really, that's the best way I can say that on a live stream. So if you would like to hear all of the 12-year-old boy jokes ever said, 12 to 18-year-old boy jokes ever made, and then immediately laughed at by the actors making them, I absolutely encourage you to. This is a show that we did out on Market Square several times, and I told Tom Parkhill this year, I really feel like I'm getting away with murder because it's ticketed. At least you're not trying to enjoy your food sitting out on Market Square while we make a whole lot of poop jokes, and lots of jokes involving sex. So if you would like to come see that show, we would love to have you. It's going to be very, very funny. Our actors are Denise Blank, who, if you saw As You Like It last year, played Touchstone to my Audrey. And then Rain Palmer, who played Rosalind in that play. Rain has been a staple with Tennessee Stage for several years now as one of our favorite performers, along with Denise. And a newcomer, Erin Hines. Erin has extensive background with the Renaissance festivals and improv, and has spent some time working in the theater. And so we thought we'd bring him on and spend a bunch of time with Erin playing all of one particular type of part in Shakespeare. That's all I'm going to say. If you don't know the show, then I encourage you to come check it out and come see us. And you can get your tickets right over at Ijams. The website right now, I just saw, says tickets will be on sale at Ijams' website soon. I'm going to update that right now because they are on sale. So if you check out the buy tickets button right in the top of the screen, then you can grab some tickets from there, and we would love to see you. Speaking of, also make sure that you check out TennesseeStage.com/Zoom in order to register for our our first folio 400 years Shakesology event that will be happening on opening weekend. So July 22nd. I will probably look a little more harried, and my dark brown circles under my eyes will probably be a little bit bigger, but I will be so excited to share it with you, and I know Jennifer will too. So thank you all so much for everything that you've done. We truly appreciate it, and we will see all of you on the other side.
Thanks.
Let's see.
It's now saying the webinar is being recorded. Was it not before?
No, it was. That's weird. That's fine. That's silly. All right, I'm gonna kick Steve out. Hi, Steve. Then the rest of them are me. I'm gonna go turn off the YouTube one. I'll be back in a second.